So we are back, and let me check this real quick. Okay, so we're back, and we're about to start with the check segment for Tucker Carlson. But before we do, I have Stan from Virginia. He was our late fourth, and I'm going to have him introduce himself. Go ahead and do that, Floof.
Howdy, my name is Stan. Like you said, I live in Virginia. I've been a Virginia boy all my life. I have done a multiple of things: truck driving, school bus driver, diesel mechanic, and I pretty much take care of old people at the time being.
Before we move on to the segment, what have you done in trucking?
My main thing was transportation of extra trucks from lot to lot. That was my main trucking experience. I was the person that they would get on the last minute, right before the end of the day, to move 4 different trucks before everyone else or everyone else went home, and I did all the dirty work.
Okay, so moving overstock.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, so we have the Tucker Carlson segment, and in it, Tucker was kind of all over the board about trans people and firearms and NPR. I'm going to play some short segments, and we'll all just kind of comment on this. I'm going to mute the chat until I'm going to mute the chat for the audience until I stop the segment, and then everybody will have the chance to speak.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. If there's one thing your average liberal understands perfectly well, it's that there's safety in numbers. Don't go out alone. Bring 80 million people with you. It's safer that way. There is a reason, a fundamental reason, the Democrats are natural joiners and organizers and petition signers, and that their highest virtue is conformity. They know that as long as they're all wearing the same uniform, they'll probably be okay. This is why you'll see one person in Brookline or Bethesda raise a Ukrainian flag in the yard, and the very next day, everybody on the street will have one too.
Okay, so he's not wrong about how Democrats generally run things in the country or run their organizations in the country. He's right. Uniformity is safe.
Yeah.
We learned that in the Marine Corps. If you stand out, you are going to get caught, and you are a target.
That is true.
Well, it's like the Japanese proverb too. It's I'm trying to remember if it was the Japanese or the Chinese one.
Is that the one about the nail being hit?
Yes.
Yeah.
The nail that sticks out gets hammered.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a Japanese one.
Yeah.
Someone watched The Karate Kid recently because that's in there. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I've actually never seen The Karate Kid, which is weird.
I haven't seen it in a long time now. To comment on like Bethesda and like Northern Virginia, it is absolutely correct. There's a reason why Northern Virginia usually goes towards the Democrat side, is because that's where all the numbers are. Yes.
Isn't Northern Virginia kind of like
its own little
the capital of Fedistan?
Kind of, yeah. The sad part is it reaches out quite far. The town, or actually city, Winchester, on the western side of the north side of Virginia, it reaches all the way out to there because, weirdly enough, it's still in technically Northern Virginia. But yeah, that's I was actually in part of that area earlier today, and those signs are absolutely everywhere. Ukrainians, flags, those specific signs, I see tons of them.
Yeah. How correct would you say it is if I were to say that like Virginia currently is basically comprised of either neo-libs or neocons and not really much else? Because I know a lot, like it's also kind of to me tends to be neocon central. That in Arizona.
I'm not in either space as much as I used to be. When I was younger, I was a hardcore conservative. I was like, because that was my upbringing. And now that I have, I guess, matured, so to speak, I have seen the differences of like the trans issues, like gun rights issues. Excuse me. And with Virginia, a lot has happened in just the last 10 years. And I'm not just talking about Northern Virginia, it's all of Virginia. So to say that it's either one or the other, it's actually, there's a weird mix of people like me that actually take up like the term moderates. There's actually a lot more moderates in Virginia than anyone in the world is led to believe. People just want to live. They don't want to have to pay as much taxes or no taxes at all. And I'll give a small definition. In the heart or part of Northern Virginia area, just outside of Tyson's area, everyone should know Tyson's. It's where Johnny Depp likes to shop. There's a little town-ish, almost village called Vienna. This place has the highest, or almost the highest, tax rate of all of Virginia that I can think of. So let that be a lesson to anyone who comes to Virginia. Don't go to Vienna.
No, don't go
do you
to
know
Vienna.
Do you know what the tax rate is, or what it roughly is?
For the property tax or the
it's a property tax issue, you'd say?
well, no, it's just tax overall in that little area.
How about just say income tax?
Well, they don't regulate that income tax. That's a state issue. Well, state and federal, that's just their income. The thing is with Vienna is the property tax is atrocious. The what am I thinking? Excess tax is atrocious. The fuel tax is over 10%.
Damn. Do they have a specific sales tax, or is that also just only
that is their own specific sales tax? And that is over almost 15% in some spots.
Wow. That's like Canada levels of sales tax, which I didn't think existed in the US. Like Quebec, the sales tax is well. Fun fact about Quebec: we have a federal and provincial income tax. Federal is 7%. Then the provincial income tax for Quebec is 8%, but it's 8% of the income. It's 8% of the total price. So the Quebec sales tax taxes the tax of the federal tax. So it's not 7 or 8% of the initial amount. It's 8% of the initial amount plus the federal tax.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar to hear.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
But let's get back on topic for the whole issue. Shall we watch some more video?
Yeah, we
Sure.
get that.
Yes.
Suddenly, it's an entire neighborhood of foreign policy experts all specializing in Eastern European border disputes. It's amazing. Just last year, these very same people were all eminent virologists, every one of them with passionate views on the details of pandemic management. This is, in other words, not a movement of rugged individuals. This is a party based on the idea of the group, the bureaucracy, the blob. It's the party of weak, fearful people who are huddled together for collective power. When the Democratic Party speaks, it is always with one voice, often in a North Korean accent. One thing the party often speaks about is gun control. No American has the right to own an effective firearm, a firearm that does what firearms are supposed to. They'll tell you this at length. Having a gun like that is just too much autonomy for you. If it continues, you may start to believe that you're a free citizen. And we can't allow that, and we won't. Joe Biden, for instance, makes this point regularly. Watch.
We're living in a country awash in weapons of war. I got it done once. I'm going to do it again. Eliminate assault weapons. It's time to ban these. It's time to ban these weapons. The right to bear arms is not an absolute right that dominates all others. You don't need an AR-15. I'm serious. Think about it. Ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines.
You don't need a RAR 15.
Where can I get this RAR 15, please?
RAR.
I think that's the new model that's coming out next year.
Yep.
It's not the AR-15. It's not the RAR 15. It's the RAR 15.
Yeah. So about that whole trope of the AR-15 as a weapon of war. You were a Marine, Erica, correct?
Uh-huh.
Did you ever use an AR-15 in the Marine Corps?
No, but there is an interesting backstory about the AR-15. So, the AR-15 was in fact in Vietnam.
Oh.
So in 1959, Eugene Stoner released the AR-15 to the general public. Now, this is before the GCA was ever even proposed, so the country had only been working on the NFA.
Oh.
And so there weren't any actual laws surrounding automatic firearms.
I thought the NFA was kind of like the law on automatic firearms.
Well, the NFA/GCA is the law on automatic firearms now,
Oh.
but it didn't used to be.
What was the NFA then originally?
The NFA basically just said, hey, you can't have these small concealable weapons without
Oh.
ATF approval.
Oh.
So you couldn't have a sawed-off shotgun, you couldn't have a short-barrel rifle, under anything under a certain length you couldn't have, which in and of itself is ridiculous, but that's beside the point. AR-15s were in fact released to the public before it was ever considered in military service. And in fact, there was a long history of people hating on the military because instead of replacing the M1 with a newer, updated, lightweight weapon, they went from the M1 to the M14. And it was crap, especially in jungle situations.
Yeah. Didn't it jam all the time?
Yes, which is what they had experienced in Korea in 1950 through 1953.
Right.
So after Vietnam kicked off, they're like, okay, the M14 doesn't work. We need something else. And so the military had gone and asked for different designers to submit a design, at which point Eugene Stoner sold the design to Colt, and I think to Smith & Wesson as well. And they came jointly to the table with the AR-15. So the first few rifles that came off the line that actually saw combat were in fact AR-15s. But after the military gets their hands on a weapon, they redesignate it. So if you've seen the most recent service pistol for the military, it's a Sig Sauer P320, but that's not its designation. It's actually the M17 and the M18.
Why does the military do that?
Uniformity.
Bingo, uniformity.
Oh, question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why use a SIG when like a Beretta or a 1911 is way superior?
Well, actually, the Beretta was not superior in the trials back in the 80s when they adopted the M9. It had, in fact, been beaten out statistically by the Sig Sauer P226. But the 226 was more expensive than what Beretta wanted for the M9. So the military went with the M9. They are practically the same when it comes to those two weapons. As it comes to the new P320, it passed all the tests and it was the cheapest pistol to choose. So when the military runs these things, they go with like the two best contenders, and then whichever one's whichever one's cheaper, they take.
I.e. military grade.
Yeah.
But what about the 1911?
The 1911 was a different time, okay? Don't come at me with that two world wars crap.
2 world wars. I'm just saying, and the fucking Vietnam War.
Yeah, the Vietnam War was when it met its match, though. Okay.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I also have heard over the years that the issue with the M16 in Vietnam wasn't actually with the gun itself; it was with the bullets. And apparently, the bullets were there was a mismatch in the size of the bullets, and that was what was causing all the major issues in Vietnam. Have any of you heard anything like that?
I've heard something.
When it came to firearms jams in the M16, most of the problems came from the select fire being set to automatic, which is something most people didn't understand at the time. Whenever you have either a closed bolt or an open bolt automatic weapon, you can't just pull the trigger and let go. You have to fire off at least 7 rounds. Otherwise, it will jam. They corrected the design with updates over the years. I mean, when I got out of the Marine Corps, we were up to the M16 and the M4A4. So that means it had gone through 4 different iterations. Both of those rifles had. But the A1 iteration of both of those rifles were just absolute crap on automatic.
Is the M4A1 kind of like the successor to the M16?
No, it's not a successor. It's just a shorter M16.
Oh.
It's a short barrel rifle. It is quite literally, if you wanted a civilian M4, you would have to get a tax stamp because it's a short barrel rifle.
Right.
I think it was a 10-inch barrel.
Oh, wow, that is short. I didn't know the M4A1 was so small.
Yes, and in the Marine Corps Basically, the only people that get it are infantrymen and officers. If you are a desk jockey like myself, you get an M16.
Hmm. Which would you say is superior, if there is like a metric to compare them?
M16.
Ah, yeah.
But we're talking straight ballistics. If we're talking about MOUT, which is military operation over urban terrain, the M4 comes out way ahead of the M16.
Hmm. Interesting.
Okay, so
Oh, and
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. We have a question in the chat. It seems. Z is wondering: have you ever seen someone with a 9mm with stock scope, silencer, and extended mag?
Yes.
Huh? I didn't know
I've
you.
only seen one.
I've never seen a
I've
9mm with a stock before.
well, I mean, I have. There are.
It's a very weird modification.
Yeah,
Is it
it's
practical?
Not really.
No, not at all.
Oh.
It'd be like using a stick as an arm brace.
Well,
Um,
like if you add like a stock and a foregrip onto like a revolver, it turns into a carbine, which is viable, and you can add a scope on it as well.
well,
And apparently they did that.
A revolver, you say. So that would be an interesting. What would happen if you added all those things to a Pfeiffer Zelica 600? If any of you know what that is.
I got no
what?
clue what that is.
It is the world's largest handgun and a revolver. I'll post a. It fires a 600 Nitro Express round, which is a rifle. It's a handgun used originally designed to kill elephants.
Jesus.
I'll post a picture of it just so you can see how large it is, and it's also the handgun. I really want one of these. Here you go. That is a handgun, allegedly.
We'll revisit that in after hours.
Damn. That's something MacArthur would have on him at all times.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't fire a 50 cal, it fires a 60 cal.
Let's go ahead
all right.
and get back to this video.
Yeah.
All right.
Need an RA-15 or whatever they call it. So that's the head of the Democratic Party speaking very clearly that the party's position on guns. If we don't control them, you can't have them. Every Democrat thinks this is part of the catechism. So you can imagine our surprise. The other day, we're driving through Cambridge in the old hybrid Subaru, adjusting our surgical mask to cover both nose and mouth, and listening, needless to say, to National Public Radio, the voice of menopausal liberalism. And as we're listening, we hear this. We're going to play it for you and see if you can understand our total shock.
Mass shootings targeting LGBTQ spaces and a rise in anti-trans rhetoric have inspired some queer people to take up arms. New Hampshire's public radio Todd Bookman joined a monthly gathering of a gun group that sees firearms as key to their own self-defense. And as you might imagine, this story does include the sound of gunfire.
On a recent Sunday morning, the parking lot of Pawtuckaway State Park in southeastern New Hampshire is filling up with hikers. There's also a different crew, packing up warm clothes and weapons.
Thank you all for coming to Rainbow Reload.
Before I get to Tucker and his obvious disgust, I just have to say how he's about to portray this is absolutely stupid, because they called it Rainbow Reload. They didn't say anything about trans people.
I think, though, if I'm correct, wasn't there one person that was being interviewed about this trans specifically?
Yes, the person being interviewed about it was trans. However, it's an LGBTQ group, which means it's not just trans people, it's all people of the group.
Right. Yeah.
Let's get to it.
Your anti-trans rhetoric makes the trans community carry guns. Rainbow Reload! They're packing heat. They'll be appendix carrying in more ways than one. Watch out. Wait a second, we thought. This is NPR, National Public Radio, suddenly telling you that actually guns are good. They're valuable tools of self-defense, really against you. So there are times when guns are good, says NPR. And we thought, well, wait a second. We've been listening to NPR since, well, Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers, and we remember very clearly their position on guns. For example,
Okay, listen, I love Click and Clack. I'm very sad that one of them passed away. I loved Car Talk.
What is Click and Clack?
Click and Clack were two brothers that ran the NPR show called Car Talk. You would have people calling in throughout the show to ask the two brothers to diagnose their car just over the phone. And they did an amazing job with it. They were very knowledgeable about cars. But back to the video, when it comes to NPR and their stance on guns, it doesn't sound like NPR has changed their stance on guns. They're just interviewing someone else who has.
True. So I would say that I think the kind of the gist of this segment is much more just like, let's look at the hypocrisy of this group of people who are always anti-gun, but then are airing this segment that seems to be pro-gun for, this one group of people,
Yeah,
while maintaining their total anti-gun stance.
See, that in and of itself is where Tucker makes the glaring issue here. He's acting as if all people under the trans or LGBTQ flag are Democrats, when there's a crap ton of us who are anarchists and are at complete odds with the loud people in the community.
I mean, there's also like LGBT people and trans people that are like not left nor Democrats, maybe Republicans, but also other stuff. It's like all over the place.
There are definitely, of course, people of every political affiliation, but
Yes.
when people refer to, for example, the LGBTQ community or something, usually they are referring to the loud collection of activists who all have the same opinions on capitalism, environmentalism, feminism, all those things, and are actively partisan Democrats.
The problem is
That tends to be like what is being referred, like that is a large thing in and of itself, and like at least my understanding, that is usually what is referred to as the quote LGBT or trans community. It is a specifically partisan group. That does not encompass all. Like, for example, Ashley is a good example. She is trans, but she's not part of that group, and that group is actively tries to destroy her, as it does everything else that is not on the same footing with environmentalism, socialism, anti-gun, actively anti-gun, and partisan Democrat.
Yeah, sadly, the reason why like we're all bunched up with them is because they're the largest, like, loudest group that keeps complaining about this, and they're the most noticed. Because everyone else just stays quiet, basically. Is fucking tries to like solve shit.
Yeah. And also to note, the corporate press also.
I'm going to take a shower.
All right. The corporate press also acts like that is the entirety of the LGBT. Like acts as if that thing is all is like the LGBT community is. Like they pretend that there are no dissenting voices, and that anyone who is gay or lesbian or trans is part of that thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you told them that, they would get this mind blow, this explosion in their brain, where they can't fucking like comprehend that.
So
And they can't
I
follow it.
can't. Well, what Tucker is saying on its face is wrong. I can understand exactly where it's coming from, because there is that amorphous blob that I will refer to as in this topic as the quote trans community or the LGBT community.
Okay, next part.
Quote, the U.S. has more guns than any other country in the world. This is the same NPR that, in between updates on the latest trans dinosaur emojis, we've been following those very carefully, routinely runs segments calling for more gun control, and not subtle ones, like the segment entitled, Many Gun Owners Support Gun Control, so why don't they speak out? Oh yeah, a lot of gun owners support gun control. Of course they do. And yet here's that same national public radio, state media, controlled by the Biden administration, encouraging people to go to the gun store immediately. But not all people, just trans people. Guns are bad, except in the hands of trans people. Wow. Here's more.
Groups like Rainbow Reload exist around the country, often called pink pistol clubs. It's a place for experts and the gun curious to practice and improve their shooting. But this goes beyond hobby. There's a practical goal here, to prepare and protect themselves.
If the world is dangerous, then you have to be dangerous back. And that very much has pushed me into where I am now.
Okay, so I need to say a lot. But in Serbia, we're like right behind the US with guns. A lot of guns here are left over from the war. They're like fully automatic. There's mortars, there's grenades, there's RPGs, there's machine guns, there's everything you can fucking think of.
Mm-hmm.
And the government doesn't like them. They have really harsh gun laws and stuff. But the people don't want to hand them in because they don't trust the government. They don't trust the government being able to defend the country from foreign invaders. So they keep on to like those guns in hopes of like protecting their family, maybe in like day-to-day life. Maybe they need a pistol or something. And the government also taxes heavily those people that have a gun license. It's really hard to maintain a gun license. But they also like, you don't see anyone just going out with a machine gun mowing down people IRL. Like that is so rare. There's only been like one mass shooting in a village and the guy was like really deranged or something. And yeah, like it's mainly like mental health and not the people owning guns that are like dangerous and stuff. Like, oh yeah, man, God forbid they have RPGs. And I could see like Tucker's point of view and stuff, but like,
well, also in Russia, if I remember right,
no,
well,
for
actually,
Serbia.
for Serbia, does it is that for any single gun, or is that only for certain weapons?
What do you mean?
Like is it just for pistols? Is it just for rifles? Like, or does it all encompass pistols, rifles, shotguns, all of it?
So the gun laws here, they really don't like you owning a pistol. Like it's really hard to get a pistol. You need a valid like reason to carry a pistol on you if you're like in danger, like if you think your life's in danger. They
Right.
do allow shotguns for hunting and some carbines, but apparently you can own some rifles that are semi-automatic. I don't know how. It's a bit baffling to me, but I don't know why the government just doesn't like people owning guns for some reason.
That sounds a lot like California.
Yes.
Sounds a lot
And
like
that's
New
why-
York.
I
That,
really
yeah.
hate this place. Because then you have countries like Switzerland when a person's mandated by the government to own a weapon for self-defense, and they need to know how to use it. And they need to, like, everyone needs to own a gun for self-defense if the country gets invaded or something.
So something that I noticed, especially the video that Erica sent me on Discord, is is the hearing for the, I think it was the House of Representatives. And I think they said it was, what was it, 10? Oh no, that was just for the brace. But yeah, the fact, like, the U.S. has more guns than it has people.
Yep.
Yes.
And the fact that we actually have something in our Constitution that literally says we can overthrow the government if we, as the people, not the government, the actual people, say we've had enough, we're done with this, you're going down.
What?
Yeah, but
What are
that's
you? What
never
are you
gonna
talking
happen.
about? What are you talking about? According to Democrats, there's nothing at all that the founders ever said about overthrowing a tyrannical government. That's just insurrectionist view of the Second Amendment.
Something
Yeah.
actually
What even?
brings up a thought.
What even are the Federalist Papers?
Okay. I'm gonna make this clear for anyone that thinks you shouldn't have a gun. I'm gonna make this extremely clear. The founding documents are two different documents. You have the Declaration of Independence, which was sent to King George, I think the 8th. I think it was the 8th.
Yes.
And then you have the Constitution of the United States. In the Declaration of Independence, there is a line that all people have certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But that was not written by Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson plagiarized that from a man named John Locke. And anyone who knows anything about American history, all of the founding fathers were extremely into the philosophy of John Locke. John Locke's original words were life, liberty, and the accumulation of property.
Yep.
Thomas Jefferson took that line and simply rewrote it for rhetoric. It means the exact same frickin' thing, because back then, to be happy was to have a lot of property.
Yeah. Interesting. I have heard that one of the reasons why the edited out the property part of that is that he was worried that it would much more heavily enshrine slavery than if it was not in there, because at the time slaves were considered property. Yeah, and he while not necessarily being the most anti-slavery person, he still didn't want he still believed that at some point slavery should have ended, and didn't want justification for it in there.
Well, that's part of it, but it wasn't just about slavery. It was wholly about optics. Whenever you write one of these documents, you have to not only choose your words carefully, but you have to either inspire the people you're speaking for, or demoralize the people you are speaking to.
Yeah.
And it did both quite wonderfully. But the whole point of bringing up John Locke is John Locke's philosophy was basically that government is made up of the people, and for a group to have a certain right, whether it's to govern or to do something else, so first must the individual have that right at an expanded, in a much broader sense. So when you look at the First Amendment, it's the right to religious freedom, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. But who's the press?
The
It's
people.
the people. It's everyone.
Mhm.
So when you look at the Second Amendment, you say, oh, I can't remember it off the top of my head anymore.
Which one is it?
Second Amendment.
Oh,
Like,
let me grab my
you mean
constitution.
you mean the full text of it?
Yeah.
Uh,
I got it.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So you have the group, the militia. Who is the militia?
Basically, every able-bodied man.
It's the people.
Wait,
Yeah.
but there's a problem with that because the National Guard is considered a militia, but it's not the people. It's like the government militia.
Militia is actually the people. It was never intended when at least when the Second Amendment was ratified, it was never intended for the government to have complete control over the militia. The militia was supposed to be completely separate.
Yeah.
They could be appropriated by the government during a time of war. They could be appropriated by the state government during uprisings, but they operated wholly independently of either government outside of those situations. And so the people were believed to be able to govern themselves and protect themselves. And so when you look at the Second Amendment, you see that the militia has the right to secure a free state. For the militia to have that right, the individual must have the right not only to be part of the militia, but also to secure themselves and their property and their family and those around them. Which is where the second part of the Second Amendment comes in. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You don't have to go into depth in how you write something to make it absolutely clear what it means. You just have to understand it.
Yeah. Sadly, about 100 years of government schooling has erased a lot of that understanding.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not even 100 years. It's more like the last 30.
Well,
yeah.
I'm more inclined to say the past 90 years, especially since the NFA was enacted.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
So the Constitution permits the people to overthrow the government, but the government will just use the National Guard to defend itself. What the fuck? I don't know. What the fuck's going on? I'm turning into Biden. With the with the police and maybe the army. So how do you deal with all of that?
Okay, so when it comes to when it comes to what's going to happen if the people try to overthrow the government, is the government may in fact try to use the military and the police against the people. But if anyone in the military learned the lessons that I learned, there's a saying that most military branches have. It's instant willingness and obedience to orders. But it's not instant willingness and obedience to orders. It's instant willingness and obedience to lawful orders.
Actually, I think it should be like the obedience and what you said to the oath you swore to the Constitution and the people.
Which the saying instant willingness and obedience to lawful orders means that any order that is issued to you must be within the Constitution. And within the Constitution, the U.S. military cannot fight the people. They cannot do it. It is unlawful. Any single one person that wants to come in as a military service member and fight the people as we're overthrowing the government, they are going to be in violation of the Constitution. And if the people win that war, every single one of those people is now a traitor.
Oath breakers.
Yeah.
Mm.
My least favorite type of person on Twitter. Oath breakers.
But even with this, even with this, they still use the National Guard just because the U.S. Army can't do this, but the National Guard can.
So, just based on your time in the military, how many people do you think would refuse those unlawful orders? If and when shit hits the fan, what percentage do you think will just say no?
Are you talking about overall or depending on the branch?
Let's say overall at first, just to keep it simple.
Honestly, it depends on how many people are still in from the time that I was in.
And there's not many.
Yeah, so the military has a lot of turnover. Most people don't make it past their first contract. The ones that do are either extremely loyal to their oath, or
they want to have retirement.
Are extremely dependent on the government.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are extremely loyal to their oath, they're simply just going to say no, screw you. So call about half of the lifers the ones that are going to say no. So you've got about an eighth of the military instantly saying yes, and an eighth of the military instantly saying no. That leaves about 3/4 of everyone left. And I'd say it's probably 1/3 will say no and 2/3 will say yes.
Do you think it is more like it is different combination based on, like, for example, who's actually going to have boots on the ground compared to who are just the office workers and or like auxiliary staff? Like, do you think the boots on the ground would be more likely to say yes or no?
I think the boots on the ground are more likely to say no.
Because they're having to put themselves in danger.
Right.
And they're going to know what they're up against, especially if they took any lessons from the lifers that were in Iraq and Afghanistan. You do not fight an insurgency, ever. You don't do it.
You failed. Yeah.
We've failed every time since Vietnam. It looks like Z had a question. What is freedom of speech nowadays? Everything. Everything is freedom of speech. If they try to arrest you for it, they can get fucked.
I forget, is it I know it's under some state laws. Kind of like if people make the argument of saying of yelling fire in a crowded like movie theater.
When it comes to something like that, it takes what's called intent.
Yes.
So you truly have to intend for harm to come to someone. Otherwise, it's free speech.
Yeah. Where do you stand on, for example, like incitement? Like, for example, I don't mean incitement in the way that certain people mean, where you just say mean things as incitement. But for example, if you were to say, hey, person A, go and kill person B.
You mean like fuck the police?
Yeah. But, yeah, so say I was to say to Molly, hey, Molly, please go kill Z. I would never say that, but where do you stand on that in the context of freedom of speech?
That would in fact be intent. You did intend for harm to come to someone.
Mhm.
That's unlawful.
All right. How about if it's more broad, like just for example, someone is to say gas the well, I'm not sure I can say this on YouTube, but you know the population
You can
that would be
say it,
targeted.
but
The bankers.
yeah.
Basically, but if someone was to say something like, which is more abstract, like you are calling for harm, but not to any specific individuals. It's more of an abstract thing.
I'd have to think on that.
Under
Yeah,
the problem is under federal law, it doesn't stipulate under the
yeah.
First Amendment.
My understanding, based on like various case law, is at least legally you're allowed to say that. You have to be able to prove imminent harm to a specific person. Like, so just saying gas this group is not actually showing that you are putting a specific individual in immediate harm.
Well, it requires it. It will always require intent,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the biggest thing.
and proving intent is hard as fuck.
Yeah.
All right, so we've gone a bit over time. I'm going to pull one more video into this, and then
Alright.
we're gonna close out the stream, and we're gonna do after hours at that point.
Yay.
So I specifically want to get to the Democratic witness for
Yes.
the joint
Oh, you mean
committee
pencil
hearing.
neck?
Yeah.
Yeah, pencil neck.
Mr. Wilcox, and he says some very telling things. So I'm gonna play the majority of this segment for you guys. We'll come back, we'll comment, and then we'll close out.
Sounds good.
I'm going to stop him there because this is a whole lot of nonsense.
Yep.
You can almost see the puppet strings.
Okay, I just gotta say this. This is really shitty that he's using like a dead girl to guilt trip people into hating guns when she could have died in a car crash. She could have died by like a plane crash.
Well, actually, that was brought up too. Like I'm trying to remember what senator brought up the
Here we see a couple of teens.
Sorry.
Yes.
So one of the senators brought up the point of the Christmas parade.
Yes, in Waukesha.
Yeah. Yes. Well, yes. So they brought up like, well, why hasn't the Ford Escape been banned on roads? Why hasn't the vehicles been banned? Because it wasn't the vehicle who did it.
No,
It's a tool.
It was the person. Now,
Yeah.
as to Mr. Wilcox, or as
Pencil neck.
as Dean would like to call him, a name that I cannot say on air.
Can I say it?
No, you cannot say it. Do not. Mr. Wilcox made very specific mention about their involvement in solving crimes in jointly with state and local governments, like this crime of jaywalking.
Here we see a couple of teens walking back into one of their homes when an unmarked police car, which turns out to be an ATF vehicle, pulls up out of nowhere with an agent and a police officer trying to have the teens come outside for questioning.
The fuck?
Those fellows that just walked in, can you send them out to talk to us, please? Because I need to talk to them. What's the problem? They were taking my daughter from the book. I need to go talk to them. What's the problem? Right now. I need to talk to them. Right now. What did they do? They were walking in the middle of the street, and I need to talk to them. So please send them out here. What do you mean? Man, this isn't up for debate. They need to come outside. You are. You have to see. You are. Yeah, they crossed over in not a crosswalk. So please send them outside for me. There's no crosswalk.
Okay, so I don't have to go into any further detail. At some point, the ATF tried saying that,
And the local police department too.
They were fleeing, but they weren't fleeing. You could see that they were walking very calmly. It doesn't matter if the lights are on. If these kids are not running, they're not fleeing.
Yeah. Did you see what the police department said, like the statement they released, that apparently the reasoning was that they looked like they were carrying guns?
Yeah.
They were trying to hold their
What the
pants
fuck?
up.
Yeah. What the fuck?
That's
you just assume like 10-year-olds are harboring guns.
A big problem with the police is just them being power hungry, and it's a thing here as well.
Yeah.
Not
Oh,
power
yeah,
hungry.
this-
They're like
this
to fucking
is,
flex their authority and stuff.
This guy just like oozes Jim Bro energy
It's like
right here.
the type of people who usually want to be cops are usually the type of people who should not be.
Well, and this specific ATF agent on the screen right now, not only does he ooze Jim Bro, but he's got to be in his mid-20s. He doesn't understand anything past his job. He doesn't understand anything about reasonable articulable suspicion. He doesn't understand anything about probable cause. He just thinks he has the
Authority.
power. And he doesn't.
When actually, so a friend of mine who's actually a cop, like he's like, I think he's 21. Like he just became a cop this past year, and I've actually talked with him about this type of thing because he's in small rural town, middle of nowhere, and I could probably show him this video. He's probably seen it, of course.
Mhm.
But he could literally point out 4 or 5 different things on just this video that literally say this is going to be a massive lawsuit because one, they're on private property with no warrant, no actual suspicion.
Yeah.
There's no probable cause. And the fact that he's also parked illegally. Doesn't matter about the lights. If you're on private property, they can sue you for damages of property.
Didn't they try entering the house at one point?
Yes, they did.
Oh,
Okay, well,
Which is unlawful
That's-
entrance.
yeah,
Yeah.
that in and of
Under
itself is
the
seizure of property.
under the 5th Amendment, I think.
Yeah, that's a Fifth
Yeah.
Amendment violation. It doesn't matter unless you're in hot pursuit, which is an exigent circumstance.
Let me
You
double check.
cannot enter a house without a warrant or consent.
Yeah.
And
He's probably gonna claim that it was a hot pursuit.
and and that's exactly what they had claimed at one point, was that it was a hot pursuit. But you can't have a hot pursuit without someone physically trying to get away. And if they're walking calmly, they're not trying to get away. It's not hot
It's
pursuit.
the 4th Amendment, not 5th.
Yeah.
Well-
I'm surprised they didn't just try claiming that they smelled marijuana and thus probable cause for breaking into this person's house.
But
Oh
then
yeah.
they'd have to have a drug dog.
Well,
Right.
Fourth Amendment is about privacy. Fifth Amendment is about due process. Entering a house without a warrant and without an exigent circumstance and without consent is a violation of due process under the takings
It's kind
clause.
of both. It's kind of both in a way.
Well, yeah, it is
Yeah.
both. But
And,
Yeah.
what I'm saying is
Yeah.
it's a takings.
So,
Yes.
what exactly is the takings clause?
So the takings clause is actually a legal theory. You've heard of eminent domain.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So the government can take your property, but they have to reimburse you for it.
Mhm.
When it comes to a Fourth Amendment violation, it can also turn into a Fifth Amendment violation. So, searches and seizures
Mhm.
can become Fifth Amendment violations when they actually take something from you in an unlawful fashion, because there was no due process. They didn't have the right to initially seize your property, and so under that legal theory, they violated your due process. They didn't get a warrant, and they took something from you.
Now, that's actually something that kind of made me think of when someone's in handcuffs, whether they're up against a cop car or whatever, frisking a suspect or whichever, would that also count under the 4th and 5th?
It depends wholly on the situation. So we have castle doctrine, and a man is the king of his castle. So it has the highest level of privacy under a Fourth Amendment legal standard. So you have to get a warrant to enter a person's property. But say for a car, it has a slightly lower standard of privacy because you're generally operating it in public. Same
on
thing,
public roads,
same thing for walking around on a sidewalk.
like a public intoxication.
Yeah, you out in public, you have a much lower expectation of privacy. So the courts determine determine what is okay as a violation of the Fourth Amendment, depending on how much privacy a person can expect. But when it comes to actually going inside of the clothes, like taking something out of your pockets without having probable cause, that is a violation of not only the Fourth, but also the Fifth. Because now you're entering a private area. The private area is your pockets, your bag. It has an extremely high assumption of privacy. You cannot just, as a cop, open that and take stuff out of it. You have to have probable cause because it's still in public, just like
Do you
a car.
have to have probable cause that just a crime has been committed, or specifically that a crime has been committed and something in the bag relates to the crime?
And
So-
of
Like,
both.
like for example, say someone was caught jaywalking. Does that mean a cop can search their bag?
So
I have never seen a cop arrest someone or ticket someone for jaywalking.
According to the ATF, probably could.
So when it comes to probable cause, you have to form a reasonable understanding of what's going on in the circumstance. So, say for instance, you smell weed and you see someone put something in their pocket. Now, at that point, you have reasonable articulable suspicion to stop them, talk to them, maybe frisk them. If you gain more evidence throughout that detainment, that would most likely lead to a judge issuing a warrant for an arrest or a seizure. The cops can at that point enter those areas. So your pockets, your bag, but they have to have enough proof that would lead a reasonable judge to believe that something pertaining to a criminal act was in there. And you have to very clearly specify what the criminal act was.
I see.
Okay, so we're going to leave it off there.